friends, for science today we're going to be doing a really quick and easy experiment that you can also do at home. You don't really need very many things to do this, and if you want to try it at home you can. To try it at home you need a bowl or some type of container filled with just regular water. I just used water from my sink. And then you can find different objects around your house to put in the water. Today we're going to be looking to see if different things float or sink when they're put into water. When you're choosing your objects, a couple of things are important. Number one, only pick things that can get wet and will be okay if they get wet. Don't put anything in the water that you don't want to get ruined by going in the water. And number two, try to pick things that are different sizes, different shapes, and pick some that are hollow. That means they're empty on the inside, and not hollow means they're full on the inside. So think about those things as you're picking your objects. If you want to follow along today with the science journal, you can. We are going to be making a couple of changes to the journal today for this experiment, but we're going to be using that basic setup for this one. So first of all, our problem in this experiment is what will sink and what will float. So if you have a journal next to number one, we're going to be writing those two questions today. So go ahead now and add those to your journal if you're following along with us at home. Now for number two, our hypothesis, we're going to be looking at the 5 objects that I picked, and you're going to be deciding if you think they're going to float or if they're going to sink. If you're doing this at home and your objects are different, your hypothesis might be different if you want to write in your own objects too. So let me show you the 5 different objects that I picked, and then we're going to be using a sentence frame to write our hypothesis today. So object number 1 for me is Cooper's sippy cup. I would call this object hollow. That means it's empty on the inside right now. Object number 2 that I have is a plastic fork. Object number 3 is a lime. Object number 4 is a marshmallow. And object number 5 is a paper straw, and it is also hollow on the inside. There's nothing on the inside of the straw. So now you're going to decide which one of those objects you think is going to float and which ones are going to sink. For this, we're going to be using 2 sentence frames. Your first sentence frame is going to say, I think that blank is going to float. And your second sentence frame is going to say, I think blank is going to sink. Whatever you think for these objects, write them in the blank. If you think all of them are going to float, then you can write all of them in the float blank. Go ahead and fill in your hypothesis now. Alrighty, so now let's do the experiment to see what's going to happen. Usually for observations, we draw a picture of what's happening. You can do that. You can draw 5 different pictures if you want for this experiment, or you can just write the words sink or float depending on what happens with each one of these objects. So let's first drop object number 1 into the water bowl. So this object is Cooper's sippy cup. I'm just gonna hold it up and drop it in, and we're gonna decide if it sinks or floats. All right, so it is floating. It's on top of the water. And even if I try to push it down, it's not really going anywhere. So I would say that the sippy cup floats. Let's try object number 2. Object number 2 was my plastic fork. I'm gonna drop this one in. And this one's a little bit harder to tell right away. It is floating at the top of the water, but it's slowly sinking. So I would say it's a little bit of both. Since it didn't totally go to the bottom of the water, I would also say that the plastic, oh, there it goes. The plastic fork finally sank. So I would say sank for this one. Started out okay. I thought it was gonna be floating. All right, let's try object number 3. This is my lime. Drop it in. And right away, the lime just dropped right to the bottom of the water. So I would definitely say that the lime sank. Let's try object number 4, my marshmallow. Drop it in. Ooh, and the marshmallow did not drop. Can definitely see some of the sugar coming off of the sides now that we got that marshmallow wet. But I would definitely say that the marshmallow would float. All right, and let's finally, ooh, it's all slippery now, slippery marshmallow. All right, and object number 5 is the paper straw. So let's go ahead and drop this in. Ooh, and the paper straw also floated. So it looks like we had 3 objects that float and 3 objects that sink. The ones that float were the sippy cup, the straw, and the marshmallow. And the 2 that sank were the lime and the fork. Now for our results today, what we're going to be doing is just making 2 little categories underneath number 5. We're gonna write the word float at the top of one side and write the word sink at the top of the other side. And then we'll write the names of the objects where they go, if they float or they sink. And finally, we're gonna fill out our conclusion. So what we wanna do here is take our results and turn them into a sentence. So for our conclusion, we wanna say that the sippy cup, the marshmallow, and the straw floated, and the lime and the plastic fork sank. Go ahead and fill in your conclusion now. Now, the last thing that we always do is we talk about why something happened in an experiment. I do know the answer to this, but I want to see what you guys can figure out. So think about the objects that we dropped into the water. What was the same about all of them? Go ahead and leave a comment on the video if you think you have an answer to why this happened. And if you got it, I will reply to your answer. Later this week, we're gonna try this experiment again, but we're going to be using salt water, and we're gonna see if we get a different result.